Shalom. Today's Daf Yomi is Daf Yomi for Hashanah Rabbah. Today's Daf Yomi, we're davening for Shalema for Yafa Dina Basaya Tova. So we're going to start the Gemara on Kiddushin Nun Gimel, two words from the end of the Daf. So the Gemara has been discussing what is the reasoning for Rabbi Meir's position in the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir's position in the Mishnah was that if you're Mekadesh, a woman, if you try to betroth a woman with Hekdesh, that if you do it intentionally, it is effective. But if you do it accidentally, it's not effective. That is what Rabbi Meir says in the Mishnah, Nun Beis and Beis Hamei. B'mezid Kidesh beHekdesh, b'mezid. So the Gemara says, beHekdesh b'mezid Kidesh, b'shogeg o Kidesh. If you try to betroth a woman with hektish intentionally, it works, but not accidentally. And so the Gemara on Gimel Amabez in yesterday's staff explained at first the reasoning that Rabbi Yaakov said he heard from Rabbi Yochanan, and also Rabbi Yirmiyah made a suggestion. So Rabbi Yochanan had said that the reason was because a person wouldn't have wanted to have betrothed to have deconsecrated their hektish into chulin, and in order to use it, if you use the hektish, you're deconsecrating it. So that was Rabbi Yochanan's logic. But so that's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Basically, Rav Chisda explained Rabbi Yochanan by saying that there's no me'ilah b'shogeg, that since you're not misappropriating if you use it accidentally, it's unless you're actually eating it. That's how we explained yesterday's Gemara. But not with money, because money is not being destroyed. And so therefore, the name of Hektish is still going to be on it if you do it accidentally. And so therefore, if he's trying to betroth her with accidental money, then the name of Hektish is still on it and it doesn't work. But Rav is now going to give a different explanation. I'll just say it outside and then we'll read it inside. Rav says that our Mishnah, when it says Rabbi Meir says that Mekadesh B'shogeg, it's not effective with Hektish, that's because we're talking about a very discrete case. That what's the case that it's not effective? And that it's talking about the big day kahuna shalobao, the garments of the Kohen that have not yet disintegrated or not yet worn out. And the reason is because there's no law of misappropriation on these garments. And so therefore, it's still going to be considered the garments of Hektish. And so therefore, you're not able to betroth them because they're not his garments. And so that's what Rabbi Yochanan says is the exact case of our mission, only in that discrete case. So the Gemara says on the bottom of the Gimel Amabez, Amar Rav, now on top of the Down Amar Aleph, Chazarno called Stadim Shel Rabbi Meir. We looked through all the cases, all the rulings of Rabbi Meir throughout the Shas. V'lo matzinu hektish b'shogeg ein misfala. V'lo matzinu hektish b'shogeg. We never found the case hektish b'shogeg ein misfala. B'mezim misfala. We never found another case that if you did it b'shogeg, it's not going to be deconsecrated, but if you did it intentionally, it is deconsecrated. Meaning to say, look, let's read the Rashi. So Rashi says, meaning to say, even though we learned that Rabbi Meir says b'shogeg o kidesh, it's not because, like we explained Rav Chisda's logic, that it's not because he's of the position that hektish b'shogeg is not mechalo. Because remember, we attributed that Rav Chisda said that there's no me'ilah by shogeg, and so he says, but Rav is saying that that's not the reason. We looked through all Shas, it's not the reason, because we looked at every place that Rabbi Meir talked about Hilchas Hektish, and we never find that. So what's the reason? So Rabbi Meir is saying, according to Rav, that both if you do it accidentally and if you do it intentionally, it is mistawel. But there's one case where it's not mistawel. And if you would do it mistawel, it wouldn't work because she wouldn't have wanted to do it accidentally. So therefore, there is one case where it's not mistawel. And that's the reason why if you do it accidentally, it's not you can't betroth the woman with it. And what's that case? It's a specific case where there's an exemption and you're allowed to use the temple's property. So since if she accidentally uses temple property, it's still temple property and wasn't mistala, wasn't deconsecrated, and so therefore the hektish is not going to be chal. And what's that case? That's talking about, says our Gemara, Mishnah Seinu bikatnos kahuna. It's with the garments of the Kohen Gadol, shalom bolo. So the Kohen Gadol wears his garments, and they're still valid. They haven't worn out. So basically, he's wearing the garments that don't belong to him. So now, a second after he finishes wearing them, he tries to betroth the woman. A second after he finishes his service, he tries to betroth the woman with them. So there's a specific exemption that you don't have to take off the garments immediately, that you're not misusing the temple property. The rabbis allowed you to wear those garments then without being in violation because Torah wasn't given to angels. And so therefore, in that case, that's a specific case where you're allowed to use those garments. Because you have to be able to wear something immediately, and so therefore, for that reason, that's the one case of where we say that if it was done accidentally, if you misappropriated something accidentally, it's not going to be effective. It's not going to take effect because it's still going to be hektish property. But normally, when you misappropriate some property, it leaves accidentally. It leaves the according to Rabbi Meir, it would leave the property of the temple, and therefore, typically speaking, you would have been able to betroth her with hektish if you were accidentally did it because it's no longer the temple property. So the Gemara challenges this position of Rav. Is that really the only case? So Shema, what about the fact that there's katnas kahuna shabalu? It says we have a different source that even if the garments were worn out, you're molen ban divrei Rabbi Meir. So how can Rav say that this is the only cases where the garments were not worn out, but even if they're worn out, that Rabbi Meir says that it's a valid betrothal? So the Gemara says, doesn't that mean my lav afilu lo balu? So isn't he saying that? Isn't he saying? So let's look at Rashi. Katnas kahuna shabal molen ban divrei Rabbi Meir. Doesn't that mean even if they are worn out, he would have allowed you to betroth them. So even if they were not worn out, he would allow you to betroth them. And then Rabbi Meir said that you can't do it accidentally in that case. And so isn't he saying even if they're not worn out, which is the way Rav explained them? He says no, no, specifically if they're worn out, then under those circumstances, then if you move them, Rashi says since they're not able to be used because they're worn out, then they're like other hektish. And so therefore, you're not allowed to have benefit from them. And so therefore, if you accidentally use them, then they're no longer hektish, and he can betroth with them. And if he did it purposely, then they were nischalo, then they were deconsecrated. So the Gemara again challenges Rav's explanation of Rabbi Meir. That if you misappropriate, so here what we're talking about is that they would take every Rosh Chodesh Adar, they would put out a call for a half shekel to be given to the Beis HaMikdash for the karbanos, and the new collection that's the Chadasin will be placed in shofaros, will be placed in charity collection boxes that were hard to steal from. That's what they're called, the shofaros, and they were not placed in the old boxes. And they're placed in the new boxes. And then if you delivered your Machatzis shekel later, they put them in the older collection. And that older collection was used for building up the walls of Jerusalem. The support of the walls of Jerusalem. So in the middle of Nun Daled Amud Aleph, we say Molen b'chadasim, the ain't Molen b'atikin. That's the position of the Tanna Kama. Some say it's Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Meir says that you're Molen af b'atikin. Rabbi Meir says that it's considered to be misappropriation even with the old money. Rabbi Meir Omer Molen b'shiarei alishka. Meir says that if you're using the old money, that's also going to be considered like you're misappropriating it. Meaning, say, if you used it accidentally, Rabbi Meir would say you're misappropriating it. But why? Isn't this the exact same case as the case of the katnos kahuna? Isn't this the exact same case of the garments that were worn out? That if you use them accidentally, it should not be considered me'ilah because it's impossible to not use them. And so too by this money, because what was this money really being used for? Name a whole of a nisnu anos. Why don't we say the same thing here, that even if they were used accidentally, you should not be considered to be misappropriating them if you use them accidentally, because the Torah wasn't given to angels. And what was this old collection of money used for? Because the walls of the city and the towers of the city came from the leftover remnants came from that second shofar box. And they all came from this collection. And so therefore, just like we say that the rabbi said that if you accidentally used or unintentionally used the garments of the kahuna, you're not going to be responsible for mi'ila in that purpose. And so therefore, for that purpose, you can't betroth the woman with it because it's still temple property. So to this case, these walls of Jerusalem, this money that was used for the walls of Jerusalem, if you're using the shade of the walls, or if you're sitting on the shade for a moment, that should also be considered like the Torah wasn't given to angels. And so therefore, if you unintentionally use this shade for your own benefit, that should not be considered like it is mi'ilah. And so therefore, why does Rabbi Meir say that is considered mi'ilah? So doesn't this contradict the principle that Rav says that the only case is the case of the garments? So the Gemara says, no. Lo tema Rabbi Meir, don't attribute this position to Rabbi Meir, or ema Rabbi Yehuda. Attribute this position to Rabbi Yehuda. When Rabbi Yehuda says, in this case, that there is mi'ilah, and so therefore it's not Rabbi Meir's position, so it's not a question on Rabbi Meir. So look at Rashi. Ema Rabbi Yehuda Omer Molim Ba'asikim. Kidabrinim Masnisin. Nami Vishoge Kidesh. That our Mishnah says that Kidamrinan, that like we say in our Mishnah, that our Mishnah says that even if you betroth the woman unintentionally, she's going to be hektish. Because what's Rabbi Yehuda's position? Even though he says the garments of the Kohen are able to be benefited from after their service, you don't immediately take them off. With respect to other benefits, you're not allowed to use them. And so therefore, therefore Rabbi Yehuda says, even though there's one case where you can't use the garments, but now if you're using the garments for other purposes, you're misappropriating. And so therefore, if you betroth the woman with it, it's become chulin. But if you would do it intentionally, but Rabbi Yehuda's other position that if you betroth the woman, that if you use temple property intentionally, that is not under the rubric of mi'ilah. And so therefore, if you use it intentionally, you have not been betrothed her. So the Gemara says, well, it's not the case of mi'ilah. Mi'ilah is where you bring a korban, you take an oath, you pay back plus 1/5. That only applies if you do it accidentally. If you do it intentionally, you've done a different sin, but not the specific sin of mi'ilah, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, so according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're saying that you have mi'ilah by the walls of Jerusalem, but how could that be? This is inconsistent with a different position of Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, Tashman the Tanya, I'm Rabbi Shmuel, I'm Rabbi Yitzchak. Well, before we get to that question that I've just raised, there's another one, another attempt. Tashma the Tanya, I'm Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yitzchak, Amne Yishalayim Shenashru. Let's say you have the stones of Jerusalem that they fell off the walls. Molen Bahem, Divri Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that is considered mi'ilah. So isn't this a question on Rav again? Because we're saying here that that's the position of Rabbi Meir, but Rabbi Meir should say the same thing like he said before, that it's not going to be considered mi'ilah there because the Torah wasn't given to angels. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Don't say that position, don't attribute that to Rabbi Meir, attribute that position to Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara has the same question. Why would you say it's Rabbi Yehuda? But now this question I was asking for, Rabbi Yehuda, Yerushalayim Mikdash. Rabbi Yehuda says that Jerusalem itself is not considered like the temple. It's not considered like a korban. It's not holy. So why is there mi'ilah on Jerusalem? And the Gemara proves this from a Mishnah in Nedarim. In Nedarim, the way a neder works is it's called hatfasa, that you associate an oath with something That's absolutely prohibited. So you say this loaf of bread to me is like a korban, then you can't eat that loaf of bread because a loaf of bread has become a vow upon you. So in that context, the Mishnah in Dharm, if you say that this loaf of bread is ke'imra, if this loaf of bread is like a lamb or a kedirim or is like uh, uh, um, a flock of sheep or that are karbanos or ke'etzim, like wood that's used for the altar, or ke'ishim, like fire, ke'echol, ke'mizbeach, ke'Yerushalayim, then in all these cases it's a vow. And if you say it's like Jerusalem, it's a vow and it's prohibited upon you, the loaf of bread, because Jerusalem is like a korban. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol Omer Yerushalayim lo Omer Klum. Rabbi Yehuda says if you say Yerushalayim, you said nothing. And so therefore Rabbi Yehuda is saying that Jerusalem is not hektish. So how can you attribute this brisa to Rabbi Yehuda? So the Gemara says, and if you want to say, well, there's a distinction, Mishum do Omer Ki Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yehuda isn't saying that. He says, if you say Yerushalayim, it's not hektish. But if you would say like Yerushalayim, it will be hektish. No, you can't give that answer because Rabbi Yehuda says explicitly, "V'atanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kol Omer Ki Yerushalayim Lo Omer Klum Ayit Sheyidar B'Davar Kar Yerushalayim." Yehuda says unless you said like Jerusalem, you've said nothing. Unless you say something explicitly brought in Jerusalem. Unless you make a vow about something that's offered in Jerusalem, because Rabbi Yehuda says that's something that Jerusalem is not hektish, and so therefore, how can you attribute this price that as an opinion that there's me'ilah on the walls or stones of Jerusalem to Rabbi Yehuda, or Rabbi Yehuda himself says Jerusalem is not considered some sacred, that there is, it's not sacred. So the Gemara says, Trei Tanai Ninu. So there's two positions as to what Rabbi Yehuda says. There's one who says that Yerushalayim is going to be like hektish, that if you take from the stones, you're going to be misappropriating. Another position, it says it's not. And so therefore, the one that when we attribute the brisa to Rabbi Yehuda, that's the one that says Jerusalem is like hektish. But now we're going to get into a little bit of, the Gemara is going to now suggest our second approach to a third approach, really, but really it's going back to the second approach to explaining Rabbi Meir's position, why he says if you're Mekadesh B'Shogeg, if you try to betroth the woman accidentally with temple property, Rabbi Meir says that it's not effective. And so Rav's answer was it's only not effective in the discrete case of the garments of the kahuna or something like that, where even though you did it accidentally, the property does not leave the temple property. It still remains a temple because you didn't misappropriate it. That's what Rav is saying. But now the Gemara says, the name of Ula, Mishmei Bar Pada, Omer Hayar Meir, Omer Hayar Meir, Hektish B'Mezin Mischalal B'Shogeg Mischalal. That he says, Rabbi Meir says that if you do it intentionally, it becomes deconsecrated. But if you do it accidentally, it doesn't become deconsecrated. So that's the explanation. It's a very simple explanation that if you try to betroth a woman with an animal intentionally, a korban, then it's still the temples, according to Rabbi Meir. So therefore, you can't betroth her with it. But if you try to do it accidentally, excuse me, just the opposite. Can you please pass those tissues? Hold on one second. Right, exactly. So Ula says in Bar Pada that Rameir's position is that if you're Mekadesh B'Mezid, if you do it intentionally, it's going to be deconsecrated, and so therefore the hektish is going to be, the Kiddushin is going to be valid because it's not the temples. But if you do it accidentally, it still remains the temples. But Shogi Emes Chalel, and so therefore you can't betroth her with it because you didn't intend to use it. And the only time we say that if you do it accidentally, it becomes deconsecrated, only in one discrete case. And if it's deconsecrated, you would be able to betroth her with her only with respect to a korban bilvad, only with respect to a sacrifice, and only with respect, meaning to say only with respect to the idea that you'll have to bring a korban if you did it. So that's the only thing it says. If you did it accidentally, you bring the korban. But it doesn't mean that it's actually deconsecrated. So Gemara says, well, we don't understand that. Since it's still the temple's property, then why are you bringing a korban? Why are you going to be liable for a korban? if it remains the temple's property and you haven't therefore done anything with it. So therefore, Elaki Asa Ravin Parish Mishmei de Barpada. So Ravin came along to give a different explanation of Barpada. Now like Ua. Said Omar Ayara Meir, Hektish remains in Mistal, Bashogig and Mistal, fine, just like Ua so far. So Lo Amru Bashogig Mistal Ela in Yanachila Bavad. When do we say that if it's deconsecrated unintentionally, that if you use it unintentionally, it's deconsecrated? Only with respect to the consumption of it. Meaning to say, if you eat a loaf of hektish unintentionally, then we say it's no longer hektish. And so too, if you light a candle or have any benefit where you completely consume it. But if you just use the money of hektish accidentally, then there's no miyua because it's still going to be in the domain of the hektish. And that's the other explanation now of Rabbi Meir's position when it says B'shogeg Eimesalo, because they're of the position that Rabbi Meir says that if you use it unintentionally, it remains in its status of hektish, and therefore you can't betroth. So Amar Nachman, Amar Avada, Barahava, Halachak Rabbi Meir b'Meiser. All the Stamwan Tanakavase. Halachak Rabbi Yehuda b'Hektish, all the Stamwan Tanakavase. So now we have to just remind ourselves of their shitos from Nun Beis of a Beis from the Mishnah. That what does Rabbi Meir say by Meiser Sheni? And when it comes to Meiser Sheni, the law is like Rabbi Meir, who says that the money belongs to God. That even though you have the right to use it, but you have to eat in Jerusalem, that money belongs to God. And so therefore, if you betroth a woman with the money of God, Rabbi Meir says, intentionally or unintentionally, it does not work because it's not your money. And so now he's telling us that the halacha is like Rabbi Meir by Meiser, because we have an anonymous Mishnah that's just like him. And the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda by Hektish, and the law is like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to Hektish, because we have an anonymous Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda. What is Rabbi Yehuda's position by Hektish? That if you betroth the woman accidentally, it's going to be a valid betrothal. Rabbi Meir says if you betroth the woman accidentally with Hektish, it's not a valid betrothal. But Rabbi Yehuda says if you betroth the woman accidentally with Hektish, it's valid, because he says under these circumstances where you do it accidentally, it loses its status of hektish, and so therefore you're betrothing her with something that's fluid. But if you would do it intentionally, it wouldn't work because because you don't want because the reason why it doesn't work is that the hektish doesn't go out from its hektish state if you try to intentionally take it out of its state. And so therefore it's still hektish, and so therefore it's the money of the temple. So again, the law is like Rabbi Meir because there's an anonymous Mishnah like him when it comes to Meiser Sheni, that you can't betroth purposely or accidentally because it's the money of God. The law is like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to Hektish, that you can betroth with Hektish accidentally, because that's how it leaves the status of Fulin. But if it would be done intentionally, then that's how it leaves the status of Hektish. But if it would be done intentionally, it remains Hektish and you can't betroth it with it. So those are the two anonymous Mishnayos that we have that attribute these positions, and that's why we rule like Rabbi Yehuda that you can betroth with accidental me'ila and hektish, and Rabbi Meir that you cannot betroth with Meiser Sheni money. Right. Right. Right, but intentionally, it's not miyua, so it remains in its status as hektish, and therefore you can't be mekadesh with it. So now the Gemara says, let's look at a Tana like Rabbi Meir. Tana Gavaz is Rabbi Meir b'Meiser Mai. He did not, like we learned in the Mishnah in Meiser Sheni. Karam Ravai. What's Karam Ravai? This is the fruit. The fourth year, you have to take it to Jerusalem to eat it. So now, what about if you want to redeem it? If you want to redeem it, you don't need to add a fifth. Meiser Sheni, you would need to add a fifth to redeem it to bring it to Jerusalem. And there is no time where you have to destroy it. Unlike Meiser Sheni, where there is a time. Beisol says you have to add a fifth for Karam Ravai, and you have to destroy it. Beishamai says it has another law of Parat V'Yeshel Olos, which is the early grapes that you have to leave for the poor. Beisol Kulolagat. Beisol says no, the Karam Ravai, all the fruits, you don't have to give any to the poor. You put it all in the vat, and you can press it and turn it to wine. And what's the reasoning for Beisol? My time in the Beisol Garmi Kodesh mi Meiser, because you compare it to Meiser Sheni. And Mama Meiser Yeshlo Chomesh Yeshlo Bir, just like Meiser Sheni, there's an extra fifth, and you have to destroy it. After Mervai Yeshlo Chomesh Yeshlo Bir. So too there, if you want to redeem this Kerem Mervai, you have to add a fifth, and you have to destroy it. Beishame lo Garmi Kodesh mi Meiser, and Beishame doesn't compare it to the Meiser Sheni. Beisil Omram Kemeiser. Beisil says that the Kerem Mervai is like Meiser Sheni. So command Sviru, who does Beis Shammai hold like? Who does Beis Hillel hold like? And the law is like Beis Hillel. Who does he hold like when he says that the Kerem Mervai is like Meiser Sheni? Rabbi Yehuda, if he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it is your own money, am I cool guy? You should have to give. You should have to give. Why does he say it all goes to the wine press? Amar Meiser Mammon Hedgedu. You would have had to. It's your own personal money. You'd have to give the tithe on it. Now, Rabbi Meir. So it must be that he holds like Rabbi Meir, who says that it's the temples. And since it's temples, you don't have to give these gifts to the poor. And how does he? And where's the anonymous Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda by Hektish? Which again, what does Rabbi Yehuda say by Hektish? And if you betroth accidentally, it works, but intentionally, it doesn't. Let's say we learned in Mishnah. Let's say there's a treasurer who sends some money in the hands of an adult of sound mind. And so he appoints him as agent, and he's carrying his money, but he gave him temple money. And then the guy who sent him off, the guy from the temple who sent him off, remembered, I don't want him to use it before he got to the shopkeeper. Remembered, it's temple property. So then the Chanvani mal. So then we're going to say, if he remembers, so Shilach Biapikeach, Vinizkar Achlo Igia Itzacham money, and he remembers before God gets to the shopkeeper. So then if he remembered Vinizkar, Shilach Biapikeach, Vinizkar, and he remembers after he sent it out, Achlo Igia Itzacham money. If he remembers before it got to the shopkeeper, then the shopkeeper, then he's intentional. The treasurer is intentional, but Chanvani mal ukashiyotzi. But the shopkeeper who didn't understand it, he's the one who does the me'ilah when he uses it, because the shopkeeper is unintentional. So the storekeeper, the treasurer is intentional, but the shopkeeper is the one who used it. So therefore, the shopkeeper, without knowing, he's the one who unintentionally used it, and so therefore he has done me'ilah. So that's exactly like Rabbi Yehuda, and that's the Mishnah. The treasurer remembers once he sends it out. I intended to that. Yeah, I know, but it's his intent. What's his state of mind when it's being used? That's the whole concept. So, but he doesn't say that. If he would say he doesn't want it to be used, then the Nizkar Shlo Igi Tzacham money. Right. Yeah. So that's like Rabbi Yehuda, that the hektish is only if it's done, that the mi'ula is only if it's done accidentally. Look, Rabbi Yehuda b'ma'itzer mi'utin. So Gemara says, how can we say the law is like Rabbi Meir by Ma'itzer Sheni, that it's Mamon Hedjo when we have two examples? By Meiser, how can we say the law is like Rabbi Meir by Mamon Gavoa when we have two examples that the money is by Meiser Sheni is Mamon Hedjot? So Rabbi Yehuda Meiser Milo Tanan. Didn't we learn about Tanan? Poda Meiser Sheni. So somebody wants to redeem his Meiser Sheni. Mosif alav chamisha. So bein mishalo bein shenita lo b'matana. That if somebody wants to redeem his Meiser Sheni money, whether it is, excuse me. Somebody wants to redeem his own Meiser Sheni money, he has to add on a fifth, whether it was his or whether it was given to him as a gift. Now, how can he be given it as a gift? Money. Who is this Mishnah in Meiser Sheni like? Who is this Mishnah like? You aim a Rabbi Meir. If it's Rabbi Meir, mi mati yav matana. How could he be getting this money as a gift? Meaning to say, the assumption of the Gemara is after the money was separated and it was turned into Meiser Sheni, it was given to him, and then he has to add on a fifth because it's his. But how can it be given as a gift? It's the money of God. Rashi says, he's giving something that doesn't belong to him. How can you give a gift after you separate it? So the Gemara explains. V'amar Meiser Mama Gavohu. Elav Rabbi Yehuda. Must be that this anonymous Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, who says that it's your money? You can give it as a gift. The Gemara says, no, it's Rabbi Meir. He gave it to him before he separated anything. Kasavar matana shel hormu, that if you have the gifts that they weren't separated, kamishal hormu dami. You didn't give him the Meiser Sheni. You gave him just regular food before it was tied, and that's not considered Meiser Sheni. Well, about a similar case, exact same case, but it's not Meiser Sheni, but Neter Avai. Apoda Neter Avai shelo. Most of lo chamisha so bein mishalo bein shenitan lo b'matana. If you want to redeem your Neter Avai, you have to add on a fifth, whether you got it as a gift. So if you want to say this is Rabbi Meir, Mimati Yavav, Gamri Kodesh Kodesh Meiser, Rabbi Meir compares Neter Avai to Meiser Sheni. Must be it's Rabbi Yehuda's position. And the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Meir, Rachma is giving good in the Yav Kashu Smadar. You gave it to him when it was before it came into the category of a grape. It was a sapling. With the local Rabbi, it was an unripe grape. And not like Rabbi Yossi who says Smadar Azra Meshu Pri. And not like Rabbi Yossi who says the Smadar is like a grape. It's not yet a grape. Another approach, Tashma, again, where they hold like Rabbi Meir. This is from the Mishnah again from Meiser Sheni. Tashma. So Mashach Menu Meiser Bisela. Let's say, this brings us back to a case we had at the end of Gittin, that if they're doing a transaction and the purchaser purchases the Meiser Sheni and he purchases it for a coin, we'll always speak with those. But he doesn't actually give him the coin. He pulls it to him, but he doesn't give him the coin until the price of those grapes went up to 2. No sin sell he could give him the coin and he gets it. And Meiser Sheni Shalom, and he's bought this Meiser Sheni. So the money, but who is this person? Ilema Rabbi Meir. Who's the sheet of this Mishnah? If you're going to say it's Rabbi Meir, it can't be. Remember, we said that by Hektish, that even though you've pulled it, you haven't acquired the Hektish until you've given the money. And so therefore, if the price of the grapes went up, you'd have to pay more because you didn't acquire it just by pulling it. So it's proof from here that this anonymous Mishnah is not like Rabbi Meir, Elav Rabbi Yehuda. So now we've got 3 braisos that are all, or 3 Mishnayos that all support Rabbi Yehuda, that money is that the Meiser Sheni is mamon hedjodu. And now, like Rabbi Meir says, it's mamon hektish. So why are we ruling like Rabbi Meir that Meiser is mamon hektish? So Gemara says no. Olam Rabbi Yehuda. This Mishnah is really like Rabbi Yehuda. And that money is Meiser hedjodu. So we have one anonymous Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda in this place. And we have 2 Mishnayos, 2 anonymous Mishnayos like Rabbi Meir. Meaning to say, the one from Edios and one from Meiser Sheni. That's what Rashi says. So therefore, Gemara says, Visa Sama Davka, Mali Chadstam, and Mali Tracetam. Well, if the whole point of anonymous Mishnah is that's how Rebbe is ruling, like, what do we care if there's 1 case or 2 cases? Why in 1 case is he ruling like Rebbe Meir, 1 case, or in 2 cases like Rebbe Meir, 1 case like Rebbe Yehuda? So Amram Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Halacha Rebbe Meir, the law is like Rebbe Meir. No, because the first position which we ruled like Rabbi Meir was in Adios, and since it's in Adios, that is the place where they collected everything and ruled like how it was supposed to go. And so this is today's daf. We went actually much longer than usual, an extra 7 minutes. Very, very complicated daf, but Baruch Hashem, we're going to go over it after we do our tikkun, our Shana Rabbah davening, and Hashem should give us the strength to help us understand the Gemara. So We'll stop the recording. J- Yeah.